Now, today marks exactly 2 years since the Usindiso Building fire in Marshalltown, which claimed the lives of over 70 people. Survivors and families of those who lost their lives, they gathered to mark the incident. Now, the event was organized by the Usindiso Community Forum and the Marshalltown Fire Justice Campaign in partnership with various civil society groups. Lawyers for Human Rights, Mametlwe Sebei, joining us tonight to talk about what next that can be done for the victims. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you for making time for us. Let's start with the question, an all-encompassing question that says, what does justice look like for survivors of that fire, but also importantly, families of those who died?
Good evening, Gori. For us, it is very simple. The Campaign Commission last year established that the city of Johannesburg was responsible for the fire. And as a lawyer, where there's capability in law, there's liability, right? Those survivors and the victims, many people have lost their lives. These were, children, these were, breadwinners in their own families. And I think there's a way that we can be able to quantify what compensation in those situations were. Survivors have lost many livelihoods. Many of them have sustained a life-changing physical injuries, but also economic damage. So the city has got to come to the party in terms of helping those people also to rebuild their lives. More than that, we demand a criminal prosecution. Because you see, Usindiso fire and the tragedy is not just a natural calamity that fell out of the blue sky, right? It is, a reflection, or rather, the inevitable consequence of a criminal neglect by the various authorities within the city. The city authorities that were supposed to ensure that those buildings are complying with the bylaws, that were supposed to provide basic services, water, sanitation, electricity, all of that. But also the response when the fire happened, the gutting of the emergency response systems, all of that is a criminal neglect for which there must be accountability and justice.
I'm glad you raised this element about criminal neglect, because on the one part, the Johannesburg Property Company is not mentioned in good light by the Commission of Inquiry.
Yeah.
But there also is this one person who claimed responsibility through a confession in court that he has now since changed. What about that person? Do you believe him now, given that he has since retracted and sought to disown that confession?
So from the police investigation point of view, right, we must find an immediate cause of the fire. If there's a person that has caused that fire and this person is confirmed, this person must be prosecuted to the full extent of the law and be held responsible for the tragic loss of all of these people, right? So there is that immediate cause. But there are also other causes, right? We must ask ourselves a question. How does such a massive building become, a lake of fuel that at the slightest spark, went into conflagration that led to such a tragic losses? You can't simply then divorce that from the neglect on the part of the city and various authorities within the city, right? The pile of rubbish in that building, right? The fact that that building wasn't complying, right? And all of that catered and transformed that building into a lake of fire that caused its crisis.
Yeah, and I can remember on the day in question when we were reporting there on the ground, stories from almost every survivor that had come out of that is that the building had been partitioned with cardboards, people basically making room for themselves, those that were obviously renting out this property. We'll get to that part, by the way, of the rental element of it. But for the time being, what are the biggest challenges for those that survived it? Because listening to them today, it would appear that they effectively are homeless.
I mean, I was heartbroken by the story. of a comrade who has become a friend of mine, Mike, whose daughter, he was in coma for 6 months. When he woke up, his wife was gone, buried, but then the daughter was missing. Now, we, with the help particularly of our comrades in SERI, Socio-Economic Rights Institute, help him to pressurize the Department of Health. Ultimately, there was confirmation through the forensic investigation that her daughter was buried by a different family. Now, I thought the matter is resolved. When we spoke today, he told me that no, she hasn't been able to get the body of her daughter. Why? No, the Department of Health said he must pay. They agreed that it was by their negligence that they gave the body of her baby to a different family to bury. But now he must pay for all the cost of exhumation. And he's a broken and a poor man, right? Never mind the fact that this is a man that has sustained a life-sustaining injury, 6 months, right? And in coma. But even those that were helped in various ways, there were people that were relocated to Denver in former settlement, right? We know that they've had, tragedies upon tragedies. Their informal settlement was built on a basin that collects water during heavy rains that is flooding the entire settlement. They've had to restart their lives again and again. And all of these things were brought to the city officials when they identified the site. The people in that community said, this is not where we built, because this area, you have to look at it. It traps water, and it's actually going to flood when it's, and that's what happened. They don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to assist these people. So it's not just the fact that they have not been helped to rebuild their livelihoods. They've actually been placed in conditions that have invited other tragedies upon this tragedy.
And that is painful to hear. It is absolutely tragic. Let's conclude the conversation on this score, because ultimately, what is wanted and what is possibly most needed by the victims, including those who lost loved ones, is compensation. They want compensation, but there are those who will say that government cannot possibly be held responsible for relocating people, because in the first place, people were renting this from private entities. They were renting it out as a private property, and they were paying rental fees to whomever. And therefore, government's responsibility must solely be to try and get back hijacked buildings, and if they are inhabitable, they must be destroyed and refurbished anew.
Xoli, let's take this case. This building was a shelter for the victims of the GBV, right? How does the government abandon the victims of the GBV who came to a shelter where they're supposed to be sheltered and protected by the state, right? And it abandoned them to the slumlords, who then collect rent over the property they did not own, who collect rent over the services they are not rendering, right? How does the state allow that in the first place? So there is that question. But also there's the issue of broader justice as well, right? We have over 200 of these so-called deliberated buildings who are in a state of squalor in the inner city. In addition, obviously, to a 13% of the population in this country who are living in informal settlement under horrendous conditions you wouldn't even wish your pet to be living in, right? And this is because of the failure of the ANC to address one of the fundamental questions of service delivery in this country, the question of housing. They have not only failed to address the backlog, they left, when they took power, there was shortage of 1.5 million houses. That backlog today has increased to 3.7 million houses. Their housing program has collapsed. And the best performing year was 1999, when they built approximately 240,000. That was down to 75,000 in 2019. That was down to 25,000 in 2023, despite a massive growth in the population. And we need this, right? And this is happening at the time when the construction industry is collapsing, right? All the big construction, including Marian Roberts, is under liquidation. We are losing even the construction and engineering capacity to be able to resolve this question, all because of the criminal neglect and the austerity policies and neoliberalism of the ANC and the entire political establishment.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for tonight. I'm sure this is an ongoing conversation. Thank you very much for making time to talk to us here tonight, particularly about the plight of the victims and people who lost lives in that tragedy. Thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure to be here as well.
Thank you.